Welcome to Perspectives El Paso. I'm still Leon Blevins, Professor of Government at El Paso Community College. This is September of 2015. When I began to do this program 8 years ago, I told you, the viewing audience, that I'd try to bring you a variety of interesting people for this particular program. And not always big-name politicians or celebrities, but people throughout El Paso from many areas of life, from arts and entertainment, business and commerce, sometimes the military and so on, and education. And so here today we have an interesting person, and this is Valentin Sandoval, and I was contacted by him about being on this program. That's not unusual. From time to time other people have contacted me, and some of them I've actually invited to be on the show. Valentin, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, why in the world did you want to be on this program?
Well, because I'd seen it before. I'd seen it plenty of times on Sundays when I'm at home before you're waiting for the family to come home, or the football games are on, or just, relaxing, checking out television. And I've always, I followed, KCOS, and I appreciate, PBS and
so
what
this is
and
on
what
KCOS, and it's on EPCC TV
Yes.
here in El Paso.
Yes.
Well, good. We're
And I've following you for years. I appreciate the show. Yeah.
Well, good,
Yeah.
good. And you are a writer.
Yes.
I believe this was why you kind of wanted to come on and talk a little bit about your work on your book. And then when I went on the internet, when I got your name and I looked on the internet, I found that you also are an independent film producer. You do documentaries.
Yes.
So we want to talk about that. This is simply a conversation. Let's talk about who you are. Are you from this area?
Yes, I am. I'm born in El Paso. I graduated from Baylor High School. I went to UTEP. I was the first recipient of the UTEP Independent Filmmaking Award in 1996. I had a professor by the name of Cynthia Farah who played a very pivotal role in sort of shifting just helping me define what it is that I was going to pursue as a career. And I got the film bug. I got that award, and she put me in a certain loop of Hollywood. I was coming into the region at the time between 96 and about 2001. Prior to them going to New Mexico for the tax incentives, they would come down here to maximize on the beautiful landscape, and also to take, capitalize on lack of unions in Texas, and doing films out here for probably cheaper to save some money down.
Seems like I used to hear her on the radio, State of the Arts or something like that.
She had a TV show. She had a radio show called On Film. On Film, yes. Okay. And I believe Charles Horak now has that radio show.
Okay, that's
But it was hers, and she would talk to filmmakers here and all over the world, and just bring perspective to the region with regards to film.
Well, I'm fascinated by all of that. And then you didn't just stop there, though. You did other documentary films. You remember what that first one was about? Come on.
Yeah, I do actually. I went to Los Angeles with a very acclaimed author to do a documentary about. He was doing writing workshops in the prisons, and he was teaching inmates that were still reformable between the ages of 18 and 25, how to use literacy and poetry as a form of catharsis, as a form of psychology, as a form of expression. And I had met him here, and I had offered him the idea of me documenting his workshops, and he invited me out to Los Angeles, and I went to a place called Chino Prison, like a subsidiary of the prison for younger inmates. And that was just an eye-opening experience by all means. I was about 22, 23, I'm not exact sure on the age, but it was Peter Jennings was there with his crew, doing a story on this writer, because he's a very famous writer, Jimmy Santiago Baca, who wrote Blood In, Blood Out, and taught at Yale and at Berkeley. And so I'm there just learning the how to handle a location, how to understand where you're at and space, and how to focus on the issue at hand. And I'm there with a big old camera crew from ABC, and they were treating me like a man already, fighting for camera angles, and move out the way, that this is our show. So I had to learn that way, and I did that documentary. It garnered me a few other awards at UTEP for independent filmmaking, and one for a festival called Rascuache Film Festival, which was probably about 2006 or 2007 it came about. And I garnered an award from them for independent filmmaking as well. So that was my first documentary. was that documentary about literacy and poetry in prisons.
Okay, before we get to your latest project, your book, let's talk about any other highlights from other documentaries you did. What other subjects did you tackle?
Okay, I did one that it wasn't so much a documentary, it was rather a short film that dealt with heroin usage. I told the story of kind of a fictional allegorical person that I grew up with. Half of it was true, half wasn't. So you use that to create drama, and it tells the story of his life and how he came about to becoming that, and the tragedy of it, and the perspective that was gained as a result of that. One of the ones that I did too, that was a public service announcement here. Was on where I got about 5 kids from Segundo Barrio, and I was working at La Fe Clinic at the time, and we were hired to do a peer advisement PSA, where you have kids teach themselves, give a message of education, and the message was teenage drinking and driving. And so I gave them a scenario to come up with, and they use their own way of talking, their own vernacular, their own style, and they were quote unquote at-risk youth, and these kids just got into it, and they did the PSA. I brought in a big camera crew from Juarez, and we shot it on Super 16 film, and to our surprise, that PSA aired for 2-3 years, and it made these kids quasi-celebrities in their high schools, and the message resonated because people remember that PSA. I guarantee if I were to show it, people on TV would be like, okay, yeah, I remember that one. Oh, okay, because it was so El Paso in terms of the way they talked, the way they looked,
One time I was invited to a little dance program with Maria Carrillo, who was at La Fe. She still works with them. And it was on education. We did a little dance for these young men, the same age you were just describing there. And I pointed out the window and I said, from here I can see the jail over there. I know a man that's in jail over there. He got into drugs here in South El Paso. He ended up trying to get drugs. He ends up in a murder, kills a man. We don't want that to happen to you. Absolutely. And one avenue to avoid that is get a usable education. And you don't have to do drugs. You don't have to try to steal things to make a living. So your life can be changed. I appreciate La Fe doing the work that they do.
Oh yeah, they've been doing riveting work, for the community for generations now. And the latest one that I did was a short documentary, a 10 to 12 minute piece I was hired by an ad agency here to produce a capital fundraising campaign for the YWCA, and they were looking to raise millions of dollars to refurbish the centers across the city, I think the state possibly. And I talked to families that were living inside the homes. How they have shelters for families that are going through certain situations, and we talked to just different stories, from single parents with 4 kids living in the place to working class single moms getting their kids through college, it was 4 different stories of El Paso people that are going through their program, and that was an emotional tugger. I mean, people that saw that piece were just at the end.
Now, how did you draft this out? Did you have kind of some sketch that you did about what you wanted to do here, what you want to do here, to achieve the objective with your film that you were doing any given time? What's your creative thought process there?
Okay, yeah. When it comes from from me, when I want to tell a story, I want to choose a subject. I think it comes more from a kind of a cathartic way of me understanding the subject matter at hand, and how that affects me, and how those the imprint that it has, and then from there I go off to elicit the layout. First, it's whether it's a documentary or it's a feature film, I first and foremost try to draft a one-page, 2-page treatment, and even if it comes off crude and it's not there, I have to first write it out, and then I evolve that concept. I develop a 10 to 12-page treatment, and I really try to elicit a vision, and sometimes that vision involves an interview process with certain subjects that I gotta figure out, whether it's dialogue or whether it's a storyline layout. I gotta understand who the characters are, and then once I put that together, then I try to think of the end. I try to keep the end in mind. What is the finite statement, and how is it gonna unravel from that point on? Whether it's a documentary, it's a different approach. I've done, the irony is I've done more, or not the irony, the thing of it is I've done more fictive, fiction-based dramas than I have documentary.
Okay.
But I think it's the same process, essentially.
Are you the director and the video technician? Do you hire people to help you do the filming?
Sometimes I'm the writer, sometimes I'm the director. As a producer, you find that, especially the way I've been producing projects, independently, you have to wear a lot of hats, and sometimes the most cumbersome is finding the proper funding for it and the distribution. But the creative part of it is where the fun is. That's where oftentimes I'll hire local prominent cinematographers. There's a local DP here named Raul Hernandez who's from El Paso and Socorro, but went off to Los Angeles and worked on all kinds of big-time music videos, and he's made quite a name for himself. So when I can afford him, I'll hire him to be my cinematographer. Or there's other people that I work with. I've worked with university students. I've worked with with some more UTEP students and some NMSU students as well. I find that I have a professor over there, a friend of mine that's a professor, and I had worked on her film as an actor, a film called Red Mesa. And I think it garnered her an Academy Award nomination for Best Short. Okay. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. And she turned out to be a professor at NMSU now, and she'll send me students on occasions to help them find actors and people here in town. So you find that you wear a lot of hats. Mm-hmm. I think what I've found that I've lately, the past 3 to 5 years, what I'm strongest in is being sort of, what's the word? A coordinator, a producer. You organize the talent, you put the right people together, right. And that's been the overarching niche that I've had. But the skill sets that I've acquired, I like to think I'm a very skilled editor, and when I have to shoot something, I understand cinematography and the fundamentals of lighting to do what I have to do, and you develop your own style, your own sensibility, and you want to say something in your own way that becomes distinguishable. Like, okay, that's that person's work, and it's there, and it's undeniable. So mm-hmm. That's. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, you answered the question, but I have another. That leads me to another one, like a location. You've traveled, you've seen these places, you have in mind, oh, that's a location. That's where I want to take these people, and let's do this particular thing. But then that also involves expense. How do you get there?
Absolutely.
How do you cater everything? How do you
Absolutely.
feed the people?
Absolutely.
Tell us about that aspect of it.
Well, there's different ways of doing it. For example, when I was working as I did everything from location scout for big feature films to sometimes working with the casting director, production assistant. Mm-hmm. I went into it just with open eyes, and I was just like a kid, just totally enthralled with mm-hmm. the industry, and I jumped into it that way. And the way it works when you have a budget is it's so much easier when you're working with studios because you have a budget and you're able to afford people's time, because at the end of the day it boils down to the time, right. And so, but when you're working with a limited budget, or you're working more on the independent sort of coordination, you have to become as tactful and as crafty as you can, and without losing the sight of the power of a location to nail down what the creative vision needs. So you have to one of the things that one of my favorite filmmakers, Michael Mann, who's done movies like Heat and Collateral, I love the way he shoots Los Angeles. Many movies are made in Los Angeles, but the way his eye and his lens and his perspective is towards LA, it's just a different perspective, and where you're coming from, I think, means everything. So what I like to do is focus on something, that a location in town that we just did a music video for an artist from Phoenix named Merlin Hepworth, and he's an up and coming star. He's blowing up. He does spoken word across the country in colleges, and a brilliant teacher, and a great performer. So he came into town, and we shot over at the Hussman Building, the rail yards down by the highway, and we wanted to keep this urban, dark kind of feel, and so we shot in there. And then the rest of it we shot in Phoenix. We shot the hip hop show, the party scene inside of, over at a place in downtown Phoenix, to kind of keep a uniformity in terms of industrial rail yard looking locations. So I think that there was particular, when you see the footage, when you see the first cut, I showed it to different people that are involved in the process. What they find most intriguing is the locations. Like, wow, where was that? Yeah. Where's that? Where's that? And that's what you want to have when you do something. You want to have people question, where did you film that? Whether or not they're peers and they're going to go try to do the same thing there, or whether or not it's just, another set of eyes to be enthralled and intrigued by the aesthetic layout that you've chosen.
I'm always thinking that, where was this filmed? Where was this action taking place?
Then that's
where was that house?
Then that's
where
successful.
was that hill?
Yeah. I mean, that's what you do, right? When you go, for example, when you go to, Albuquerque, I take a friend up there. I do a lot of work up there. And I took a friend from Mexico City up there, and he, I had to get the tour from Breaking Bad, where the different locations are for people to go to, and that's just sort of niche when you go to a different city. This is where they shot the scene here, and you want to create that kind of mystique and mythology for your own city, your own place.
That's interesting. Okay, now let's give you time before our time runs out to talk a little bit about how you transitioned over to writing a book.
Yeah.
And what's the title of your book that's just come out?
The title is South Sunrises. And you can buy it. I'm going to be the salesman here. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble's, Amazon. It's on Ingram. So the press is out of Santa Fe, Sherman Asher, Western Edge Press. Okay. He's published everybody from Max Evans, High Low Country, to Milagro Beanfield Ward, John Nichols, and very honored to be part of that press. I transitioned from that as a result of. I think what I'm talking about from where I come from as a filmmaker, it all has to do with sensibility and perspective and poetic sensibility. I think I've always been a poet. I've always, leaned towards that direction as a result of being a hopeless romantic of sorts, right, when you're a kid. And then how do you contextualize that sensibility when you're older into something that's real and palpable within the industry or within you developing an industry? So I think I've always wanted to be a poet. And throughout the years, I've been working with writers, of all, from famed professors to teachers to poets. And I've always had that sensibility where oftentimes I'd go off and just write on my own and sneak off for 2-3 days.
Now, this is a novel. It's not a book of poems. It's a novel that's written with a poetic flair.
Yes, it's more. The best way to describe it, Dr. Blivens, is I was on the show Words on the Wire, a KTEP show, with two very renowned writers, and one of them mentioned that it was more like a memoir that read like poetry. But the thing is, it's not a memoir nor a novel. It's more a memoir told in verse. It's a memoir told in verse, in a poetic, lyrical verse, if I can say it like that, where it's more lyrical, but it does tell a story of my mom and my father, and indirectly it tells a story of Juarez and El Paso, and at the same time, it has those colloquialisms and that vernacular and that edge of the region of a certain time. But I was mindful to hopefully make it more universal, to where it's really just about borders. And it's about borders in general. I think we all have our borders, whether they're geographical, whether they're internal or psychological. I think it's a play off of that. It's a play off of understanding borders and how to transcend in a kind of a coming of age. How do you set your foundations? How do you become what you've always wanted to become? So it's an attempt. It's an attempt at presenting that. In as truthful a way as I possibly could.
What about major characters? Do you have major characters in it?
Yes, I do.
Male, female?
But yeah, ironically, it's my mom and my father.
Your mom and father.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I use my mom as my driving force for the narrative thread to unweave itself, or to weave itself rather. And so my father was a major character, but his was more of allegorical and imaginative, because he was killed when I was 3 years old, in Juarez, and I never knew him, he never knew me,
Okay.
and it was a car accident. He was killed by La Rutera coming out of the Kentucky bar in Juarez.
Oh.
So I tapped into his voice. What little I knew of him, I tapped into it through writing, through understanding metaphor and lyricism. And I think that's where those kinds of tools and techniques can really become a legitimate form of therapy and craft, where they're just not there to be talked about and to live in the ether, but they're there to be metabolized and made real.
Well, just recently on public radio, as I was driving home one day, I heard something about Don Quixote. A man had just written a book about Don Quixote. And a lot of votes had been taken recently about greatest novels and all this stuff. And Don Quixote came out on the top for many of
Wow.
these polls because of the nature of the characters in that story, the setting and the way that it was developed through language. And it's still around all these years. They're still studying Don Quixote and musical made about Don Quixote because of the nature of the writing and the characters that they were developed. So maybe someday your work will be out there. They'll make a musical or something.
Well, you know what? They I've been touring the country, and I'll be keynoting a conference on October 29th over at the Camino Real for a Puente. It's a Texas education bilingual program, and they got me on that. And I had a professor from Michigan State University pick up this for her curriculum up there on immigration studies. So within not even a year, I've gotten some pretty good traction on that.
Is your mother still alive?
Absolutely, she's
And
still
what'd
alive.
she say about
Well,
you when you told her, "That's you, Mom"?
She's proud of it, but at the same time, I came with truth, that without betraying any of my family family members at all. But I wanted to not make this sort of a romantic view of our family and how we're so great because we're here, and make it kind of romantic familial cultural propaganda. I wanted to make something real that played off of the truths of and the texture and the tones of the region, and how harsh it could have been in some cases. But you have to use that experience as a kind of a succulent. You gotta take it in, and then you expel that out, hopefully in a pleasant aroma.
Well, my mother was a major inspiration in my life, a major inspiration. So evidently your mother was one of the major inspirations in your life.
Yeah, and also my father. The fact that the lack of space that was left there by not having a father. And how do you fill that space? How do you fill that void? And with the understanding that he was also a journalist in Juarez, and he was a guitar player, and you start to think of like, okay, well, maybe that's where certain desires and intuitions and natural abilities come from, from the genetics, obviously, right? But when you don't know the person, you have to, and my family isn't one, and I don't know much about them. I probably have aunts and uncles and cousins in Juarez or here in El Paso that I don't even know about. So I think that's what gives it an interesting parallel, where I was able to compose through the book an allegorical figure of a father that can in some ways be as real as a real biological father.
Well, there's some that if they lose a father at the age of 3, they go to the dark side. They always see this as terrible and awful. And why did it happen to me?
Yeah.
Why was he taken from me? And they go to the dark side. You evidently went the other direction.
You know what? I would say it's sort of a yin and a yang. It's the dark and the light. There's been times when when darkness peers in as well. And the pathos is there as a result of the ethos, or vice versa. So ultimately, yes, I've chosen. I like to think I've chosen the light, and I think it's evident. But it when I was younger, I was lucky enough to have imagination. Not that other people don't have it, but I think you turn your affliction into an asset. I was able to use that to create an imaginative space where I never really found myself thinking, oh my God, I don't have a father, or why did I think when you get older and you get perspective and purview, you think, oh, okay. Then you see the importance of a solid father figure and how to influence certain directions in life and that. But it's all perspective and hindsight that I think is valid when you make it into something real, like a book.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Cynthia Farah. That was a later time in your life, but there must have been teachers along the way that inspired you and nurtured you and assisted you and showed you why this writing was not good and this writing was
Absolutely. Yeah. 3rd grade, I had one that sticks out to this day, Miss Aycock, and I recall everybody in that class was You know, we're third grade. I don't know how old you are at third grade, 8 years old or 9 years old. And I remember the talk amongst our kid circles was like, oh, she's hard. She's, you know, she's mean, and you know, be careful. Oh, so, you know, and we go into her class, and so the whole time I'm there kind of very, you know, serious about the class. And I found that oh, she was a wonderful teacher, you know, at that age. I think she's the one that harnessed the artist in me in some cases, where I was very quiet and shy. I'm very quiet and shy, and with her, she would always call me up. She had this thing where she would paint the waves from the ocean, right? And she'd have kids go up there and try to do it, and she was like, "No, that's not how to do it." And I'm like, "Oh man, my turn's gonna come. I'm gonna get scolded, you know." And I go up and I start painting, you know, the waves of the ocean, and she's all, "That's how you do it, you know. That's how you." She would tell you the kids, right? And she'd get me up to perform and play music, and her austerity was benevolent, because she was a legitimate teacher that wanted to, you know, harness young minds, and yeah, she was instrumental in that.
Well, we have about 3 minutes left. Let's look to the future. Are you writing something else right now? What are you working on?
Right now, I'm co-producing a Day of the Dead event in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with a person named Jaime Chavez, an organizer, coordinator up there, a poet in his own right and lobbyist. So I gotta go this week. I'm leaving to New Mexico to go do that, as well as doing some political campaigning work for work up there. So I've got to leverage production and TV for that. But I am working on my second book. I already have a collection of 3 short stories that are more like plays that I'm going to compress into one book.
We need to get you to give a telephone number if you want somebody to contact you. You want to put a number up?
Sure. My 915-694-8863.
Okay.
Yes.
And let's spell out your name so people know.
And you can go to my website as well, valentinsandoval.com. Okay. It's ValentinSandoval.com.
Well, you're a creative person. You're the kind of person I like to have on the show. I'm glad you gave us a call.
I'm glad you had me on.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, let's cross paths again in the future.
I'd love to.
Okay, thanks. Well, thanks for tuning in to Perspectives El Paso. Once again, we found someone very interesting in the El Paso area, and let's follow his career. Thank you for watching. I'm Leon Blevins.